the laws are that you have to make the ceiling of a sukkah for the purpose of a ceiling of a sukkah. I mean, you have to make the schach, which is the ceiling of a sukkah. The cover of the sukkah has to be made with the intention to provide a shade. When you make the ceiling of the sukkah, which is a schach, has to be made with the intention. Number one, it can't be made for a house, but the sukkah has to be made for a house. It's not made just to protect from the sun. The house is made for a permanent type of structure. But even if it's made for not for a house, but you have to go ahead and when you place the schach, when you place a sukkah, it's called sukkah because of the word schach. Schach is the covering. That's the sukkah. So the covering of the sukkah has to be made with an intent to provide shade. Now, the guy takes that pile of hay and he piles a pile of hay, and he has a nice pile of hay, and then he goes ahead and he cuts the inside of the pile, and he's left with this frame like an igloo. He's left with the top and he's left with the walls of the hay. A lot of hay. So now the question is that a kosher sukkah or not? We have here, the hay emanated from the ground. It came from the ground. So if it meets the requirements of schach, it's kosher material for a schach, but it originated from the ground. And it's also not mekabel tumah. It's not susceptible to contamination. But the Mishnah says, if you create a sukkah in that fashion, that you had this whole pile of hay, and then you cut the inside out. Here's a big pile of hay, and I cut from the inside. Let's say I have 10 feet of hay, a pile of 10 feet of hay. 10 feet, yes. Let's say it's 10 feet of hay, and then I leave the top 2 feet of hay, and I cut out the bottom 8 feet of hay, and I leave the sides. So what I'm left with, I'm left with a structure that has, let's say, 2 feet of hay on top, and I left all the walls. I left the side pieces, and now I have walls and a ceiling from materials that would work for sukkah. Good morning, Dr. Navid. The Mishnah stated that if you create a sukkah in such a fashion, it's no good, right? Hachotet begodish. If you go ahead and you cut out from the pile of hay, and you cut out, let's say, we gave an example, if you have 10 feet of hay, and you cut out the bottom 8 feet, and you left the top 2 feet, it's not kosher. Now, if you would have originally created I cut out 8, I'm left with 2. Right. As long as, in order for a sukkah to be kosher, the height has to be, it can't be lower than 10 tvachim. I use the word, maybe I shouldn't use, I'm just using an example of 10 feet. 10 tvachim is like, say, 30 to 40 inches. The height is a very small height. There's a minimum height of a sukkah, 10 tvachim height. So I'm just using an example of 10 feet, 30 feet, whatever the size of your hay was, as long as I'm going to give it 2 examples. One example is, let's say I want to make a sukkah out of hay. And I say, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create this, I'm going to take hay, I'm going to make the hay with an arch, right? With a cover. And therefore the hay is going to go like this on the top, and the bottom and the sides have walls. I created, let's say, at least 3 walls. Let's say I made the hay on, let's say, here's a pile of hay going like this, and the hay going, the side of the hay going, and then I go ahead and I make the ceiling for the hay. Right? First I made the sides, let's say, and then I made this arch that the hay should come out over me. So that would be a kosher sukkah. technically, morning, Jaime,
Morning, Rabbi.
and welcome back.
Thank you.
So we had the case of a pile of hay. You could, if a person would create a sukkah from a pile of hay, and obviously it means that you made it in a way that it's not going to fall apart when a wind will come and blow it down, because that's not going to be a proper wall. If it's going to, if everything's going to be falling away, we're talking about a thick amount, a large amount of hay. You went ahead and you created, just like a person makes a snowman. To make believe you're making three sides out of hay. I piled up this side, and I made on this side, and I made on this side. I got like a U. I made a U out of hay. So that U is like, and I piled it up at least 10 tefachim high, at least 30 to 40 inches high. I have the side walls and the center wall. So I got three walls here made out of hay. And then I decided to take this part of this pile, and I added more hay with an arch that it goes over like that. So now I constructed a ceiling. I constructed that would technically be a kosher sukkah. You see, it seems that Hashem made it easy for people to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. He wanted to make it very user-friendly. People might be traveling, people might be different places, wherever you are, wherever people are living, and just to make it easy for the people. That I presume that's part of the reason why it's so easy to make, that you can make a sukkah in such a situation. You're on a farm, you have the situation, you can go ahead and make a sukkah in such a situation. But the case of the Mishnah was you didn't make the sukkah that way. You didn't first go ahead and create the sides, the three walls, and then put up the ceiling, the top, the cover, create a cover for yourself. What you did was you first made a complete pile of hay. I made a pile of hay, big pile of hay, and then let's say I made a pile of hay, 15-foot high pile of hay. Okay, and then what I did was I decided I cut away the top, the bottom 10 feet of this pile of hay. I cut out the bottom 10 feet. And when I cut out the bottom 10 feet, I'm left with 5 feet of a ceiling that's still left. But the ceiling, let's say, went to here, 15 feet. I cut out 10. I removed the 10 feet of hay on the bottom, left 5 on top, left the walls. So now I have constructed a sukkah. Now it's a sukkah, but it's not kosher. Why is it not kosher? Because I did not recreate the cover for the sukkah. The cover was made in a way that it was not kosher. Because when was this cover originally made? The top 5 feet of this pile of hay was made as part of a big pile of hay. It was not made. This ceiling, which now became a ceiling, it only became a ceiling because I dug underneath, and that made this. Now the ceiling is there, but I did not do an action to make the ceiling now in a kosher way. I did not. If I would move every piece of hay now that would be kosher. But I didn't remove every piece of hay on the top 5 feet. I only cut out the bottom 10 feet, and I left the top 5 feet of hay on top. And therefore, that it says you have to make the sukkah. You have to taseh. You have to make that covering in a way that you're making it kosher for a sukkah when you make it. At the time that you're making that cover, when you're making the roof, when you're making the schach for the sukkah, at that time that you're making it, it has to become a sukkah that is now kosher. But if you
Rabbi, you can't. Sorry, so you can't have an intention. You can't have an intention a month ago when you're piling all this hay and say, you know what, I'm going to make a sukkah out of this in a month. And a month later, you go and you dig out your dimension so you could enter it, but you really, naturally, you have a roof from digging it out.
It won't. That would
not
be good.
Be kosher. Even though you had an intention when you
Even though you had
piled
intention, but in actuality, when you place that top part of that pile of hay, it was not placed in a kosher fashion because it was just
Got it.
part of a bigger part of hay. So even though you might have had a tent that you plan on cutting out the bottom 10 feet, it's still not kosher. So that is the law of the Mishnah. Now we're going to have Rav Huna. Rav Huna is going to share with us a very big chidush regarding this law. Rav Huna is going to say that's only if originally when you made the pile of hay, you never left a space. Let's say you went ahead and you left a space of a tefach. When you created the pile originally, you first made an arch of 1 tefach. I went ahead and I left, I created a pile of, I made it a tefach, and then I cut away. So we're going to see the case in the Gemara. Good morning, Adam, right now. Let's see the case. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, Lo shanu ella she'ein sham halal tefach. If I don't have a arch, a space of 1 tefach, if I don't have that it's risen 1 tefach, let's say the tefach is 3 or 4 inches. If I don't have it raised a tefach, the pile is a total straight pile, that's where there's a problem. However, avol yesham halal tefach, but if I have a halal tefach, if I have a empty space on the haystack, I have a space that's a size of 1 tefach high off the ground. Hari zeh sukkah. Now that is a sukkah. Now what does that mean? So let's see Rashi what's going on over here. So Rashi said, "Ela she'ein halal tefach." Rashi said, "Gova b'meshach orach v'rochav shiva tvachim k'shir sukkah." If I didn't start out the pile that it's, with an arch. If I didn't start the pile, I put the pile of hay directly on top of the ground without any space, without forming a tent. Now, a tent, if I go ahead and make something, if I go ahead and have a space of 1 tefach, and then I place something over that, I make a ceiling over 1 tefach. The ground, and above the ground, I don't put the hay directly above the ground. I go ahead and I put the hay, good morning, everybody, I create the hay in a way that the hay is raised above the ground 1 tefach. Okay, morning. We are on 16a. So if the hay is raised above the ground 1 tefach, I have, in essence, created a ceiling. I have made a ceiling. I have made a cover, and the way some of the commentators explain, let's say I wanted to make this ceiling, I made this for a purpose of shade. I wanted to go ahead and create, when you're space, let's say when you sit in a sukkah, you're in the sukkah, you're in this empty space inside, and you have the cover, and the point of the cover on top is to protect from the sun. That's the idea of a sukkah. The idea of a sukkah, right, is to protect from the sun. So similarly, if I made this little space on the bottom, I created off the ground, I created an empty space because I wanted that empty space to serve for some sort of shade that it should protect from the sun. And then Rashi says, I went ahead and on top of that empty space, good morning, Mr. Silverman. On top of that empty space, I made this whole big pile of hay. So Rashi says that would be, then it already had that pile, or there was already something called the sukkah on this pile. This pile of hay had the bottom of the pile of hay was raised above the ground. There was space between the bottom, the ground, and this hay, and therefore it was referred to, it was called already a schach. It was called a form of protection. So Rashi says, so what happens as a result of that, and then I cut it away in a way that now it's a sukkah, so we say that is kosher. Take a look at the note in 1682, and the note in the Art Scroll. You have 1682:13. Look at that note. So the note says, it opens up and it says, if you have a sukkah made from a haystack, like we explained, we said the haystack, it's not a kosher sukkah, because since when you made the haystack, let's say you made 15 feet of haystack, the top of the haystack originally the top was made as part of a pile. It wasn't made as a protection, as a ceiling. And then you cut the inside out, and then you left the ceiling, but the ceiling originally wasn't made for a sukkah, and therefore it's not kosher sukkah, right? So now, however, and now he says, so therefore, but in the case when you went ahead and you made it in a way that it started out, there was some sort of empty space, and it formed some sort of cover, that it was that, in that case, that would be a kosher, then it would be a kosher sukkah. So let's see what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Huna, lo shanu elash ein sham chalal tefach. When you don't have a space, when you didn't open up with a space of a tefach. However, aval yeshem chalal tefach meshach shiva. But if you had a space, if there was a space of a tefach, and then we say hari zeh sukkah, then that would be a kosher sukkah. Tanya namihachi. We learned in a brisa like that. The Gemara says, if you went ahead and you dug in a pile of hay to make it a sukkah, we say hari zeh sukkah. We say we have a brisa that says that if you dug in a gadish, if you dug in a pile of hay, you dug out, we will say that it is possible to make it a kosher sukkah. And we have a different Mishnah that says Vanatan ain't a sukkah. We have a Mishnah that says it's not a sukkah. Elalav shma min al-katav huna. So how do you explain one Mishnah says that it is a good sukkah, and one Mishnah says that it's not a good sukkah? You have to say, if you made it originally in a way that you created originally a space, that it was a ceiling in the beginning, that will go ahead and make it kosher for a sukkah. So the Gemara says, some asked it as a question. Tanam, we learned in the Mishnah, if you cut out a pile, if you take a pile of hay and you cut out the bottom and you leave the top, lasas lo sukkah ain't a sukkah, it's not a good sukkah, because where the ceiling was not made in a kosher fashion. V'hatanya, but we learned in a brisa, hari zeh sukkah. So Rav Huna lo kasha, kam b'yesh l'chalal tefach meshach shiva, kam b'shein sham chalal tefach meshach shiva. As long if originally you had made it with an arch in the beginning, that it was made originally with a form of a ceiling, that would be kosher. Let's just take a look. I want to see if any of the commentaries over here say more about this.
Rabbi, the haystack was just lifted off of the ground by one tefach?
Yes, we have to figure out this case, right? It was lifted off of the ground of one tefach, and
then you carved out the sukkah out of it.
Right, you went ahead. Right, before you went ahead and you made. Right, as long as if you had, we should take out your picture. We should take out your picture book. If as long as you had an arch of, if you had a space, you had a space, you had one tefach. The way I would imagine it, let's say you have this big pile of hay, okay, and you had a big pile of hay, and or you had it in a way that you had a space of one tefach that was empty, and then there was this, and you had this ceiling of this hay, and then afterwards you cut out the bottom to make it, now you have empty space of 10 tefachim.
Where is that space in dimension wise? What about if this space was between the floor and the hay? You had a 1 millimeter space, then the entire stack of hay could be considered a roof, then you carve out the roof. Where is that space, the one tefach? How could you have a space on top of the hay? Between the hays? I mean, I don't know.
Okay, we're going to have to get back to figure out this case better, exactly to figure out the, how to, to visualize this case. So we're going to tomorrow, we're going to get back to this case to figure out a little bit better the actuality of how this case ran. But those are the words of the Gemara. We have to, I see this needs some more looking into. We're going to get back to that point. Okay, let's look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Hamishal shel defanot milmayla lamata." The Mishnah states we're now on Het Zayin Amud Aleph. We're on 16a2. Hamishal shel defanot milmayla lamata. If we went ahead and we made walls, and I made the wall, let's say I started making a wall above. I had schach, where Rashi gives the case. You have schach. Let's say you have schach, and then you went ahead and you placed walls underneath the schach, and the walls do not come down all the way to the ground. The walls are above the ground 3 tefachim. Okay, it's raised above the ground 3 tefachim. So now the question is that wall a good wall? A wall which was considered suspended in midair. Why is it suspended in midair?
There's a picture, Rabbi. There's a picture on the next page.
Okay, very good. But we're gonna get to that picture. But now visualize that picture is about a pit. We're not up to that yet. If you create a wall, and the wall doesn't go to the ground, it's off the ground. Some of the wall, Mr. Haber, is off the ground. It doesn't go all the way down to the ground. Is that a good wall or not a good wall? Does the wall have to, now we said the size of a wall is 10 tefachim. Is it 10 tefachim needs to be is the size of a wall. But the wall is raised above the ground. It doesn't come, the wall, let's say you have a regular wall that's on the ground and someone cuts away the bottom of the wall. Is it still considered a wall or not? So the Mishnah says it depends how high off the ground is this wall. If the wall is raised above the ground 3 tefachim, if it's 3 tefachim off the ground, that's not a kosher wall. Unless it's within 3 tefachim, because we have a rule, if you're within 3 tefachim, if you're within a small amount, it's as if you're there, as if you're joined together. So therefore, if the wall is 3 tefachim off the ground, it's not a wall. That's the first opinion in the Mishnah. Hamishal shel defanot. If you went ahead and you make walls, milmayla lamata, you're starting above and you're working yourself down, but you didn't go all the way down to the ground. So it says im gavoa min haaretz 3 tefachim. If it's higher than the ground, 3 tvachim, sula. That wall is invalid. It's not a kosher wall. Milmata lamaila, what about if I am start from the ground, but the wall doesn't reach the schach, but the wall goes 10 tefachim high. So the Mishnah says that's good. As long as the wall is 10 tefachim high, it doesn't have to reach the what? Got that, Adam? Clear? It doesn't have to reach the schach. Im gavoa, so you have the Mishnah, you got it, the Mishnah? From the ground to the top of your wall is 10 tefachim. It's 10 tefachim. From the ground to the top of your wall is 10 tefachim. You met the requirements of the wall, but the schach is higher up. It didn't reach the schach. The wall ends here, and the schach is over here. So is that a good wall or not? So the Mishnah says, as long as it's a 10 tefach wall, even though it doesn't reach the schach, it's good. He said, what did he say? This, right. Right. Im gavoa asar tvachim keshera. If it's 10 tefach high, the wall is kosher. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Keshem shelamata lamayla asar tvachim. Just like you told me, if you create a wall on the ground, it doesn't have to reach the schach. As long as you create a 10 tefach wall, it's kosher. So too, if you create a wall, if you create a wall above and you go down and you made a 10 tefach wall, it doesn't have to touch the ground. He says it's a two-way street. The same way you could go ahead and make a wall here and it doesn't have to reach the schach, as long as it's a 10 tefach size wall. So too, if you make the wall just higher up, next to the schach, you have schach, and then you have a wall, but the wall doesn't go all the way to the ground. The wall is, let's say, more than 3 tefachim or more off the ground. He says that is what? That is kosher. Kishem shelamata l'mayla asar tefachim, kach l'mayla l'mata asar tefachim. It works both ways. Now,
Rabbi, one question.
yes.
Sorry. What about if you have a wall that is 10 tefach? Let's say it's off of the floor under 3 tefachim, but within the wall you have a space of less than 3 tefachim. A space.
Window?
Would that still be considered a wall? Because less than 3 is
Less than 3 is considered, again, if you have a wall that's, let's say, 2 tefachim off the ground, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's a fine wall.
No. Then 2 tefachim off the ground. Then the wall starts for 4 tefachim.
A window. He's saying like a window?
A window. Yeah.
Window.
1 tefach
A
of
window.
space, and then 5 more tefach of wall.
Rabbi,
You
a
have
window.
a space within the wall.
Call it a window.
Right. So we said, I mean, we had the idea if there's more wall, you see, the question is, if there's more wall than space, again,
Then
but
it's
here
good.
the question is you have a lot of empty space on this wall, right? That's your question. You have a window, you created a window in the wall, a hole in the wall. So it was
You have a horizontal window. Yeah, the entire length of the wall, there's a space.
So any space that's less than 3 tefachim would not be a problem.
okay.
The question would be if you have if you could have multiple areas on that wall that have spaces, as long as each time it's less than 3 tefachim, it's considered closed. Like we had the story. If you make a wall out of metal poles, right? And you place metal poles next to each other, and horizontally, and you have space between each and every pole. As long as the space between each and every pole is less than 3 tefachim, it's considered closed. If there's more space, if there's more than 3 tefachim, then it's considered you have a hole in the wall. And then there's laws that they have a hole in the wall. So if you have a wall, then we say if there's more holes, if you add up the holes in the wall, then the standing,
Then the space.
then
Then
we
it's not
say
kosher.
then it's not a wall. So so that might also play a role in your case. Your case,
Got it.
you know, if it's more holes than walls, then it would not be it removes the status of wall as long as those holes are 3 tvachim or more. Any hole less than 3 tvachim should be considered as if it's closed.
So for Succah it's 3.9. It has to be less than, the planks have to be less than 3.9. But for walls,
What'd you say about the
less
Succah?
than 3.
What'd you say
It
about
has
the
to be less
Succah?
than. It has to be less than 3.9.
What do you mean by 3.9? Say it again. What are you saying? 3.9 tvachim regarding what? Succah.
Less than 4 tefachim, the size of the planks.
The size of the what?
Planks, the Succah, the wooden Succah. Let's say if you're using.
Oh, you're saying about the size of the wood that we said if it's a 4 tefach wooden board,
Exactly.
it'll be a problem because that's the question of Succah pasul, or meaning would that be invalid Succah if it's a size, if it's wide, if it's something that's wide 4 tvachim, that would be invalid Succah. You can't use something that's that wide. But you're talking about here. We're talking about the space.
Space.
Here we're talking about space. There, that's talking about Succah itself. But we're going to see, interesting, if you have empty space in a sukkah, we're going to see that empty space, if you have 3 tvachim wide of empty space going across the whole sukkah, that will split the sukkah in half. In contrast to not kosher Succah, if you have 4 tvachim wide of not kosher Succah,
Right.
it splits the sukkah in half. We'll see more about that as we go along. So that is, what's the argument in the Mishnah? The argument in the Mishnah is a suspended wall, is that considered a wall or not? A wall that's hanging off the ground more 3 tvachim or more, is that considered I mean, you can knock. I mean, remember the laws of Sukkah. Most of the halachas pertain to the Succah, meaning to say, technically, the walls could be made of any material. And if you want to go in and you're banging nails and knock a whole iron bolt through that wall through the wall connected to anything, you could do that. So you're not limited in constructing the walls. So in contrast to the Succah, there's certain limitations of what you could do with the Succah. So it could be done in a permanent fashion. Also, this suspended walls hanging in midair. Okay, very good. So you got the case that the walls are hanging off the ground. So now the question is a wall that's suspended, is that a wall? If it's not a wall, if something could go underneath this or through this, or underneath this, something could go underneath this wall. A wall seems to be something that can close an area. But if something could go right through, if let's say a goat could go right through this area, if there's certain type, it's higher than 3 tvachim, so that type of space, some say that's not called a wall. That's not a wall. If something can go right underneath, right through it. So that's the Gemara says in my kamiflagi. What, Mr. Silverman, you got the case in the Mishnah? The question is, so the Gemara said my kamiflagi. What are they arguing? Mar Sava, one master holds mechitza tluya materet. One holds a wall that's suspended is materet, is considered would permit you, would permit this area to be a sukkah, even though the wall is suspended. Umar Sava, and one holds mechitza tluya Mechitza tliya eina materis. Does not work in a sukkah. If a wall is off the ground more than 3 tvachim, it doesn't. 3 tvachim or more, it doesn't work. So the Gemara is going to say, we'll see the Gemara that if a goat could go right through it, that's like the size. It's not called a wall. Like a wall is some sort of protection. If you create a wall and a goat could go right through that wall, because the wall is raised above the ground, that's not called a wall. That's not called some sort of, if you protect it from 3 cameras. Let's say if a goat could go through the 3 tvachim, that would shows you that you didn't really create a wall. I presume the idea is a wall is supposed to protect. If it doesn't enclose an area, if it's not able to stop certain things from going through, then it's not that you call that a wall. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's not a wall. A sukkah has to be it's an enclosed area. It's a sukkah. It's a private area, right? If walls make something private, but if it could go right through, it's no longer private. I got company. They could go right through it. So that's not called. So that's what the Gemara says. Tanan Hasan. Now the Gemara says we learned in the Mishnah regarding Eruvin. Bar shebein shtei chatzerot. If you have a pit, we are now on 16a3. Bar shebein shtei chatzerot. If you have a pit of water, this pit of water is between 2 courtyards. And the fact that it's between 2 courtyards, so even though, morning Max, even every second counts. Even though you have a wall that separates the courtyard, we have, let's say, a partition that separates the courtyard, but let's say that partition is above ground, right? If you look, since the partition is above ground, if you look at, okay, we'll show the pictures more tomorrow. If you have a partition that's above ground and the water is beneath it, is a little below that, the issue is if I want to draw water from this pit, but this pit is part of the pit is on your side of the courtyard, and part of the pit is on my side of the courtyard, and we didn't make an eruv chatzerot, and we didn't join the courtyard. The courtyards weren't joined together. They weren't able to make an eruv to join the courtyards. So you can't carry from one courtyard to the other courtyard unless there's some sort of eruv that's made. The same way you can't carry from, if you have many houses or multiple houses open up into a courtyard. Since we share the courtyard, it has resemblance of public property. So the rabbi said, if you go ahead and you want to carry from your house to the courtyard, you have to make an eruv to make you all like one. Because if you're going to carry from your house to the courtyard, you're going to you're going to carry from your house to a real public domain. Right? So to ensure that you don't carry into the street, the rabbi said you got to do something to join all the houses as if they're one. We collect some bread from each house and we join them together. We put some of the bread in one of the houses as if we're all part of that house. And that's how we do the Eruv Chatzerot. But then also there's that same way you have to make an Eruv, go from the house to the courtyard. Different courtyards, if this is our courtyard, this is the courtyard for these houses. But for these houses, we also have to go ahead and do something to join them together. Now they weren't joined together. And now I have this pit, this water that's going to be, every time I draw the water, I'm also drawing water from your side too. Because the water, this pit is underneath, and with each drawing from each other's water. So what do we do in order to be able to draw the water and not violate this prohibition of going from one courtyard to the other courtyard? Stay tuned. But the pool belongs to both of us, and I'm drawing from yours. So therefore, the Gemara told me you have to make some sort of partition by the pool, by that pit. And we're going to talk tomorrow more details about that partition in the pit. And we have to get back to about the case, how to visualize the case of the Godish. Okay, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Very technical Gemara on the Godish that we have to figure out that case better. All the best.
Great day, Rebbe.
You too. Have a great day. Back tomorrow.